Ever hailed an Uber and like wondered about all that tech wizardry that makes it actually show up?
Yeah. Yeah.
Today we're doing a deep dive into data infrastructure, all because you, our amazing listeners, requested a peek behind the curtain of Uber's recent tech upgrade.
It's easy to just, take that sort of thing for granted.
Totally.
But Uber's system, it's mind-bogglingly massive. They put out this blog post recently about moving to the latest version of MySQL, their database. And it really shines a light on the sheer scale of the challenges they face.
Okay, so paint us a picture. How massive are we talking, really? Hit us with some of those dizzying stats.
All right, so try to wrap your head around this. We're talking over 2,100 database clusters.
Whoa.
Think of those as like groups of servers all working in sync.
Okay.
And those are spread out across, get this, over 16,000 individual server nodes.
16,000.
16,000. And this whole intricate system handles millions of queries every single second.
Millions. Per second. Okay, that's more processing power than my brain has. It's like the digital equivalent of air traffic control, but for rides instead of planes.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And just like air traffic control can't be relying on some outdated tech, Uber knew they had to upgrade from their older version of MySQL. I mean, think about it. Sticking with an older version, it's kind of like, yeah, you can keep using that old phone that still kind of works, but you're missing out on essential security updates, speed boosts, not to mention all those cool new features.
Oh, absolutely. My old phone is like a security breach waiting to happen. I get the urgency to upgrade. But Uber was running on MySQL 5.7, which, I mean, that's not exactly ancient history. What were the specific risks of not switching to 8.0?
So aside from missing out on all the performance enhancements that come with the new version, the biggest concern really was security.
Oh.
MySQL 5.7, it was nearing its end-of-life support, which means things like essential security patches and updates were in danger of being discontinued. And for a company like Uber, where you have data constantly flowing in from literally millions of users,
Right.
that's a risk they simply couldn't afford to take.
A data breach would be catastrophic at that scale.
Exactly.
Okay, so they had a very compelling reason to upgrade and very clearly a huge task ahead of them. Their blog post called it a side-by-side upgrade. What does that even mean, practically speaking, when you're dealing with this absolutely massive amount of data?
Okay, imagine this. Instead of renovating your house, you built a brand new one right beside it.
Okay.
You'd slowly start moving your furniture, appliances, everything over to that new house, all while you're still living in the old one.
Okay.
That's essentially what Uber did, but with their database. They built an entirely separate MySQL 8.0 system, and they gradually, very carefully, moved their operations over.
That is wild. And probably a lot less dusty than a real-life move. But I'm guessing the side-by-side thing, while safer, I imagine it added a whole other layer of complexity onto an already massively complex upgrade.
Oh, absolutely. It's way more complicated than just like flipping a switch.
Right.
But this approach, this side-by-side strategy, it gave them what amounted to a safety net.
Okay.
If anything went, totally haywire during the upgrade, they could, at least in theory, just switch back to the old system without a ton of disruption.
Okay, so that's the why and the how of the upgrade itself. But I'm really eager to dig into the nuts and bolts of how it actually went down. What were some of the real concrete challenges they ran into during this massive data move?
Well, you remember how we talked about all those millions of queries that this system has to handle every single second?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Millions per second, yeah.
It turns out some of them, they didn't behave in quite the same way in the new environment with MySQL 8.0.
Really? So even though it's an upgrade, it's not a perfect one-to-one swap. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe the new oven in our hypothetical new house has a completely different way of, like, setting the timer. Kind of frustrating. Can you give us an example? What kind of hiccup did Uber run into?
Sure. One specific challenge they had to deal with was queries that were about time zone conversions.
Oh, okay.
So in the older MySQL version, these queries, they might have given you a slightly different result than in the newer version.
Interesting.
And that sounds like a really minor thing.
Right.
But when you're dealing with something as globally distributed as Uber, even a tiny little difference in how you calculate time zones
Yeah,
can snowball into some real problems.
absolutely. Especially when you think about how Uber operates in all these different time zones, riders and drivers. They're relying on accurate pickup and drop-off times, estimated fares, the whole 9 yards. I mean, it all comes down to accurate timekeeping in the end.
Exactly.
So what did they do to tackle that?
So they had to go through their code base, like super, super carefully. And they had to find any instance where these time zone sensitive queries might cause issues. It
Okay.
was basically debugging on a massive scale,
Hmm.
just making sure that every single piece of their app played nicely with the upgraded database.
Talk about finding a needle in a haystack.
Mm,
But that's the thing with systems of this size, right? Even the smallest changes can turn into these huge headaches. Sounds like vigilance and really knowing their systems inside and out was absolutely crucial here.
you're absolutely right. And this is actually a perfect example of why they decided to go with that side-by-side approach.
Right.
Because they were running both systems at the same time.
Right.
They could gradually send a little bit of their live traffic over to that new MySQL 8.0 setup while still watching everything really, really carefully.
So it was like a soft launch for their database, just to, test it out with some real-world data before they went all in.
Precisely. It gave them the opportunity to catch those unexpected problems, like those time zone issues, in a controlled environment.
Okay.
They could identify bottlenecks, they could optimize their performance, and really make sure that everything was running smoothly before they committed to using the new system for everything. And of course, they had that rollback plan in their back pocket just in case.
Right,
Right.
just in case. Speaking of that rollback plan, how did that actually work in practice?
Yeah.
Was there like an actual undo button they could press if they needed to go back to MySQL 5.7? And like how far into the process could they even use that button?
Well, it wasn't quite as easy as just clicking undo.
Right.
I mean, you have to remember they were running two separate systems in parallel.
Yeah, yeah.
So the rollback process meant that they essentially cut off all the traffic going to the new system and just redirect everything back to the old MySQL 5.7 setup.
Okay.
But you are right. There definitely was a point of no return.
Yeah, I imagine so. Like jumping off a diving board, no going back once you've made the leap. At what point in this upgrade process did they pass that point?
It happened when they reached a stage called promoting a MySQL 8.0 node to be the primary data source.
Okay.
So basically, it's like they were officially handing over control at that point.
Gotcha.
And once they started actually writing new data to the upgraded system, going back, well, that would just become more and more complicated.
Sure, it's like merging two streams into one. Once they've flowed together, it's pretty much impossible to separate them again. So up to that promotion, they had their safety net. What happened after they took that step? So they've crossed that point of no return, no more safety net. What did the final stage of this whole upgrade actually look like after they committed to MySQL 8.0?
Think of it like as the grand finale of their big, meticulously planned tech ballet.
Okay.
What they did was they began by disabling all those old MySQL 5.7 replica nodes.
Yeah.
They basically shut off the old system's ability to handle any traffic at all. So at that point, all the data requests, everything, was flowing only through those upgraded MySQL 8.0 nodes.
And this is the real moment in truth, right? After all that planning, all that testing, all the careful execution, did the whole system actually hold up? Any last-minute glitches?
This might surprise you, but that actual transition, it was pretty much a non-event.
Here.
Which, honestly, that says a lot about the effort they put into preparing and testing everything beforehand. Of course, they kept a really close eye on the system, just to be sure. But that switch over to MySQL 8.0 as the primary data source
Yeah.
happened without any major problems.
I bet there was a huge collective sigh of relief from the entire Uber engineering team.
Well, I'm sure there was. But, you just touched on something really important that we haven't really dug into yet, that human element of this whole massive project. We talked
Yeah.
about all the technical stuff, all the planning.
Right.
But what about the actual people who made all of this happen?
That's a really good point. Behind every single line of code, every server configuration, there's a whole team of incredibly smart people working their tails off.
Yeah.
This wasn't just some technical achievement. It's a testament to their collaboration, their dedication.
Exactly. I mean, just try to imagine the coordination that this took.
Yeah.
You've got all these different teams across who knows how many time zones, specialists in all different areas, and they all had to work together perfectly.
Right.
It must have taken some truly exceptional communication, problem solving, and I'm guessing a whole lot of caffeine to keep everybody going.
Well, not to mention, the pressure had to be immense. Just the sheer weight of knowing that millions and millions of people rely on Uber every single day.
Yeah.
I mean, even a tiny hiccup during the upgrade could have caused problems all over the world.
That's exactly it. You hit the nail on the head. This whole deep dive into Uber's MySQL upgrade, it shows just how incredibly complex it is to manage these systems at such a gigantic scale.
Yeah.
But even beyond all the technical stuff, I think it highlights just how vital human ingenuity is. The teamwork, the perseverance, all of that is so essential in the tech world.
It's a good reminder that even though we live in a world that's increasingly digital, it's often that human element, that passion, the dedication, that spirit of collaboration that really drives the most amazing achievements. I think this deep dive has given us all a newfound appreciation for all those unseen heroes in tech, the ones who keep things running, often without getting the recognition they deserve.
Couldn't agree more. And hopefully, our listeners out there, hopefully they have a little more appreciation now for what actually goes on behind the scenes of the apps they use day in and day out.
100%. So next time you're out there about to request an Uber, take a second to think about that whole intricate dance of data, the hard work of all those engineers, all the constant innovation that's happening behind the scenes, just to get you where you need to go. And to all you listeners, keep those deep dive requests coming in. We'll be back very soon with another fascinating look into the world of tech.